Hi, before we get started, I heard that good things will happen to you tonight if you go to Chick-fil-A. There's some sort of fundraiser going on there. So, would you guys pray with me real quick? Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for everyone here. Thank you for Jesus and your grace. And pray that you will just be with us today and help us to just have a heart for wanting to learn more about you, whether it's our classes or just the people around that we spend time with. God, just be with all of us and help us to be mindful of people that are just going through tough times so we can be encouraged to pray, amen. So, do any of you have friends that are always texting you or asking you about some class that you had or some professor you had because they're about to have that class? Maybe you don't have those friends. I have one friend in particular that's always asking me, hey, what do you think about this teacher? Like, how'd you do in this class? What was your study plan? And I'm like, okay, just figure it out yourself. It's not that hard. It's just college, right? And I thought he was crazy until I read 1 Kings 12. And that's what we're going to read today. And it may be a little more scripture than we're used to reading at one time, but stick with me. So we're going to read 1 Kings 12. We're going to read 1 through 10, and then we're going to skip 1 through 11, and then skip around a little bit after that. So the story takes place whenever King Solomon has just passed away, and he kind of fell out of favor with the people near the end of his term because he had all these big building projects, and it was just kind of hard on them, a lot of physical labor, and his son Rehoboam is taking the throne, and he has to step in and decide how he's going to respond to what the people want. So that's what we're going to read, 1 Kings 12, 1 through 11. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. Rehoboam answered, go away for 3 days and come back to me. So they went away. And then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer these people, he asked. They replied, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him, and he consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, what is your advice? How should we answer the people who say to me, lighten the yoke your father put on us? The young men who had grown up with him replied, these people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter. Now tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions. And so the people come back. In verse 13, the king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions. Skip down to verse 18. The people did not like Rehoboam's response. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. So he gets advice from the elder and the younger. He chooses the younger. As a result, his main builder is killed, and he has to flee Jerusalem, and the kingdom is split. Rehoboam knows one thing. He doesn't want to be like his father. He's seen some flaws in what his father did in the generation before him. And so he decides these people that counseled his father could not possibly know anything, right? And instead he chooses his peers, the young experts, without a lot of experience, maybe kind of like some of you are experts on soccer because you played FIFA or you've watched some YouTube videos. And in the end, this is high-stakes disaster, all because he listened to the young men of his own age who thought like him, people who had the same perspective. And here the author finds it important enough to point out that because he rejected the advice of the old men, and he listened to the peers, the people rebelled, and everything went downhill. And there's a major flaw in Rehoboam's logic here, right? Because he sees the problems of Solomon's reign, and he decides to do exactly the opposite. And as a result, he misses all the positive things about Solomon's reign. And so he fails to unite the people, and he fails to learn from the good and the bad things that Solomon did. And we've all heard that if we learn from history, I didn't say that right. We have all heard that if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. And here Rehoboam repeats it. And how do we learn from history if we don't learn from the people who lived it, the people who were there and experienced it? Somebody once said that if we're looking at the world right now without taking history into context, and we're trying to make our decisions based on right now without considering the past, it's like trying to comprehend how a mountain works and how a mountain got there if you're looking at it through a microscope. It's so much bigger than we could possibly imagine. It's like looking at a glacier where you see the top of the glacier and it doesn't look that impressive, but if you're trying to navigate around the glacier, you know that everything that's important about the glacier is at the bottom. That's what you have to watch out for. If we don't take history into account, it's like we're in a baseball game, we're up at the plate, and we don't know what the count is, we don't know how many people are on base, we don't know what pitches he threw before, and we're completely unprepared to face the present if we don't learn from the past. And Rehoboam's mistake appears clear to the author, and most likely the original readers, because the Hebrew culture respected the elders. They respected their opinions, their ideas, and their decisions above all else. But in today's time, we might not even notice Rehoboam's mistake. We might not even think it was a mistake, because it's almost shocking to see an example nowadays where the eldest generation is lifted up as knowing best, because our society bends backwards to try to stay young. Whether it's hair dye, or pills to try to stay young, or plastic surgery, we are doing everything we can to turn back the clock. We are afraid of getting to the point where these elders were. We are hungry, even in the realm of ideas. We're hungry for the next great idea, the next big thing, the next iPod Nano. Because new always means progress in our minds. But that's not always how it works. And I think today that far too often we get stuck in this Rehoboam complex. And it might be one of the biggest epidemics hitting our nation right now. And I think that we look at ideas sometimes the same way we look at technology, which is always rapidly changing. So the new iPod Nano came out, so we don't need to sell products or advertise for the old iPod Nano anymore because it's outdated, right? And then sometimes we translate that to the way we think about ideas. We look at our grandparents' generations or a couple generations before us, and we think, wow, how could they be so closed-minded? How could they be so racist, or whatever it is? And we get this sense of self-righteousness because we grew up, or we live in a world that's more sophisticated in our minds than the past generations. And so we discard them and their ideas and we take away their value because they are outdated. And as a result, we miss so much that we could learn from those relationships, such as how to protect the covenant of marriage, how to raise a family, how to suffer well through extreme times of poverty, how to live consistent, faithful lives. And when we discard the older generation, like Rehoboam did, we're not only hurting ourselves by taking away their wisdom that they have to offer us, we are also marking ourselves with an expiration date. We are telling the world, okay, the moment I turn 65 and they have new ideas and everybody else knows how to run things, I'm no longer important. I no longer have value. And so we are making ourselves obsolete in the near future. And if we only listen to the newest, youngest ideas, the newest voices, it's not a healthy way to live. But it's easy to surround ourselves with people who think the way we think. It's easy to surround ourselves with just young people in college, right? And I'm not saying that you need to listen to everything the elder generation says, because college is about thinking for yourself, right? But at OC, we also think that college is about thinking beyond ourselves in a way. And I hope that we can consider that the older generations have something to offer us, not because they were perfect, but because they have experience and they've lived through past mistakes and past triumphs, and because they deserve our respect as human beings. And so, are we determined to be stuck in this Rehoboam complex? I don't think so. So the question is, what if we dedicated ourselves to learning from the past triumphs and the past mistakes of those who came before us? What would that look like for us? How much more could we learn? And what if we gave value back to the older generations by asking them their thoughts and hearing their life stories? So my hope is that you can invest in the lives of some people in the older generation, whether it's your grandparents, a member at your church, a professor, somebody you see at a restaurant, or somebody you know that you've never really considered striking up a friendship with or striking up a conversation with. My prayer is that we are people who start to restore value to the older generations. So I hope that we can all invest in our own future by investing in our past. Would you pray with me? Dear God, thank you for the people in this room. Thank you for our professors here at OC. Thank you for just the legacy of faith that